Okay, we would like to look at the JCB Compiler. Quick overview of how it works and what it does. Really, there must be better ways to do this. I've often looked at other projects, even like Joomla itself, and I can see there are conventions that I have not followed, especially with some of the files being so huge. It's almost like a procedural script. And yet the refactoring and the remodeling of this project's area, the compiler, is an ongoing project, and constantly I'm working on it as from time to time. The reality is that it works, and it works actually quite well, quite stable, and we are keeping our finger on it so that it wouldn't suddenly become useless. Now, having said that, it's really one massive class, is unfortunately, because one inherits the other, inherits the other, inherits the other, and so it keeps on stacking previous functions upon each other, which then ends up being a huge class, and you can call any of the functions at any time after a certain layer. So that's the quick overview. But now, going to those files, there are two ways we could do this. We can actually go to GitHub, and we can look at those files there. But you can also do this on your own system. So on your own system, when the package or the component is installed, what is in the admin folder should be in the administrator components area. What's in the site folder should be in the roots component area, and this be in the media and libraries. So that's sort of where all these packages move to. So if you look at it here on GitHub, and you see basically it says admin and then suddenly these files, whereas if you look at it on your install, you would see that it's component, that's the root folder, administrator, components, component builder, and then the same files, except these two are automatically generated from the notices. Okay, so basically the files we see here is the same files we are going to look at on GitHub. So there are three areas where the compiler lives. One is in the actual compiler folder, and the other one is in the helpers folder. Now I said three because in the helpers folder it again has two file structures. The compiler folder is where basically the templates are. So there's a Joomla 3 templates area. Now when we start with Joomla 4, there will basically be a new one called Joomla 4, and we will update these templates to match the Joomla 4. And many of them might fall away and new ones will be added. And the file that controls the majority of the work of keeping track of what belongs where is this settings.json. Settings.json again is just a JSON file which basically has all these files mapped in it with various settings. So it has a create area which basically creates the folders for the admin area and the site area, and then it has a move area which basically has static values which every component should have, and then dynamic values which every component gets based on its build perspective or whatever the developer wants. And there again in the dynamics area you have an admin area, and you have a site area, and you have a custom admin area. And these are the three areas in the dynamic, and each of them have certain values and things which are used to actually when we call the build on any of these function or areas, then these switches are what is being used. So this file is what really gets called, and which is used to then build the Joomla 3 templates. And so here you have a whole lot of templates. Some of them have code in, some of them majority have only placeholders in them. You can look through these, and yes, we are moving more and more that every little bit of the file is actually becoming dynamic. So in some files you get a lot of code still, and yet in others you might find none. And that means all the code was moved to the actual compiler. Now this means that this is just the template area. And yes, still it's good to know about this area, because you might wonder, where is that code? I don't see it anywhere in the compiler. Well, then it's in the template. And really that's what that's all about. Okay, then the compiler itself, the thing where the real code is that does the work, is actually in the helpers folder. And it has two areas here. It's the actual trigger, which is this one here, compiler. And then it has these folders in the compiler again, folder, which is alphabetically organized, so that when we include those files, they get added correct in the correct order, which being get is first, then structure, then fields, then interpretation, and then infusion. And then only you would see that the file called compiler, which is in the root of helpers folder, is the one that inherits infusion. So if we open it, in fact we will open all of those. So we open and then we open get, and structure, fields, interpretation, and infusion. So let's see. So here's the compiler, the actual class that gets executed on the start of the compiler, and you can see it actually extends the infusion class. So that means everything that has been done before this class was triggered by the constructor in every class. So the constructor in every class kicks off a whole bunch of functions, methods, and loads a lot of data into the class method values. And this autoloader loads those files. Okay, so that's just a quick structural explanation. Then we go, and the first one we look at here is, over here, this one. So here we have the infusion, and it inherits the interpretation. And here we have the interpretation, and it inherits the fields. And here we have the fields, and it inherits the structure. And here we have the structure, and it inherits the get. And here we have the get. And so this is the base class. It's from this class that we build. And basically each name sort of gives you an idea of what's happening here. So in this class we're really just doing the get. We're getting all the information from the database and within its relationships and so forth. And we are packing them and making them ready, basically modeling them for the next class and for the next step. I'm not sure how to draw a model of all this. I'm not even sure exactly how I got here, except that it became like the practical next step. I were usually confronted with a problem, and then trying to solve it is how this thing evolved into what it is today. So I didn't do the way we should do things, and that is to sit down and first do use cases and all of the prep to get all your class names out and get all your, just to develop the structure in a white paper. I didn't do any of that. I started in the wrongest way. I just wanted to build a component with another component and be able to reuse that to do it again and again. That's really what I wanted to do. And I know, therefore, that there could be better ways to do this. And I hope that wouldn't actually discourage any of you, but in fact would encourage you to realize that there is many ways to actually end up at a result. Anyway, so without too much apology, this is therefore the constructor of the get class, which triggers a whole lot of things. And so just by inheritance, this constructor gets triggered and data gets added to the model, the class values, and then gets used in the classes to follow. And there are also some functions that also lives here, but which be called public, which might be used again. But like this one actually doesn't need to be public, I think, anyway. So it all gets triggered, and you can go through this get class and basically by the name of the methods be able to discover what is being done in this method, and then so forth. The next one is then the structure, and here we basically taking the template files and we are starting to pull them out, give them the right names, and put them in the right place for preparation to add the code to them. So a lot of the templates are being built here. Again, you've got a constructor, and here it starts setting libraries, and you can see in the constructor what happens first. So you can look at this and see, okay, remove folder, so we first clean out, then set libraries, then set dynamic dashboard, and then set folders, and set statistic, and set dynamic, and yeah. So you can check in the constructor how the functions order is, and then you can actually go and look at those functions quickly and see what happens in them and all the functions that are running alongside of them. And yeah, that's sort of how the structure class works. And then there are obviously some functions here in the structure class that also again gets used in further classes. We then end up at the fields class, and this is where we start actually realizing the code that needs to be added back to the files, and we start building the fields which actually in their relation to their views actually starts happening. Well, we first check that the view have fields, and if it does, then we start either by using the string method or the XML method. There are two methods in which we build the fields. If it's set to use the string field set, then this is how it will go about, and over about, where is that? Almost. Over here, it says, well, here it loops over the fields, and it uses the set dynamic field, and it passes it a whole lot of values, and so you can then follow this, go to this class method and see here is the params that it needs, and then see how it's being built. So everything about fields happens here in this class. As much as possible, I try to do a lot of inheritance and polymorphism and all these things all of the time. I like to not do it too much, and yet at some stages decoupling is necessary for stability. And so you'll see that all across the classes that I'm trying to reuse things quite extensively. Okay, now after the fields we are at the interpretation. Now the interpretation basically takes what the fields gave us, including the structure, including the get, and it starts interpreting what is being expected here. And yes, this is the class which is where I started. So if you want to know from where, which one did I write first, it's actually this one. And the get and fields and all of those code was in this class. So this used to be like huge. I mean, I think it was over 20,000 lines. And now, after doing such a ridiculous amount of coding and realizing, okay, it's absolutely not convention, I started refactoring this and breaking it up. And this is how far I've got. So please have mercy on me. we've started decoupling these, and yet we are still so far away from fully decoupling them. What advantages we've made is that if you compile a component and you want to see where what is being built, it actually, Joomla JCB actually has such a feature. It is a feature which I'm sure all of you have used. It's this line numbers, which you could say to, just yes. And that would basically mean that now in your components comments, you'll see references to where in the compiler the code was built. And that is sort of my way of making apology for this massive class, because I know the objection to it is the difficulty of debugging, and well, not necessarily debugging as much as understanding what's happening here. And so I'm trying to do that at the moment. And yet I must tell you, I've never not been able to expand on this area and actually change it and fix it, because the class names and what is being done here is actually quite understandable and easily to find. If you in the code can find the line where the code is built, you can then go to that line and very quickly actually be able to follow the path in which things happens. And so I would expect the future would hold in that we do even more refactoring on this class and have more subclasses actually. And I'm very open for you to actually get involved in this area and help to make it easier. But on the other side, the other term that also does stand out is if it works, don't fix it. So I would say as we improve JCB and as we adapt it to do better, this is where most of the refactoring will usually take place. And so every time there is a feature request and a specific area is having to change, I usually come in and refactor that whole area. That's how I'm currently working at this. It is a lot of code, but it's really simple. I purposefully didn't want to build something so complicated that if you would read it, you have no idea of following it. I tried to make it quite simple and easy to follow, and hoping that others would easily come in here and be able to see how things work in the interpretation class and be able to, improve it, make pull requests. The next one is then the infusion. The infusion class is actually where the interpretation class gets fired. Most of the interpretation class functions actually gets fired here. So we have a whole bunch of placeholders. The way JCP works is really the strength of PHP, and that is string manipulation. And so we have placeholders which are in those files that we spoke of, those template files. And those templates files are having to be updated. And so first we need to load the code which actually gets built in the interpretation class. We need to load those into placeholders. And then those placeholders in turn will be taken to the files and merged. And so it is in the infusion class that this happens. And so a lot of functions that are in the interpretation class are actually fired from this class. So it's a lot of sort of looking back and getting the work done. And so it's like now the work is getting less. So the majority of the code which we need to do the work is behind us. And really now it's just sort of organizing the logic, and this is really what's happening here. And so the massive method is just this one class, one massive method that loads all the function values into the placeholding. And then there's this content that are static, and then there's content that are dynamic. And the dynamic content placeholders work a little different in that it has two things here. One is for what it is, and then for where it is. So for this one is for the dashboard, but later you'd see it starts going to Ajax, and it has, yeah, wait, if we go up again, you see here that it actually targets the view, the list view and the actual edit view, the single view. Here it is. So it is doing a whole lot of, it's building one massive array of data, which then at some point it's going to get rid of by placing it into the files. And there are some other functions also in this class which are useful to understand. So let's see, what's the, okay, we're almost at the end of this method. Okay, so here we have set view placeholders, which basically every view has its own set of names, variations, and then we have also got language manipulation here, and that's it. Okay, so the next one is the one which is called compiler, and it actually then extends the Infusion class, and it's in the compiler where we take the templates and the logic of all the other classes, and we actually merge them with the files. So we have a class here called update files, and really it takes the new files which have been built and it adds the file dynamics and the file statics. Yeah, it updates it via the static values as well as the dynamic values, and then places it back, and then actually unsets the values, and then eventually we package this file and move it to servers and set licenses and all kinds of nice neat stuff, and that is where it all comes to a conclusion. There's also some real fancy gymnastics here being done with the custom coding concepts, where we add code into those files really here and update things, which is quite exciting area. This add custom code method is a very interesting method. It actually ties into work that's been done all across the other classes. So that's a quick overview of the compiler. It's really not that complicated. If you know PHP. If you don't know programming that well, I suppose that must be so like okay over your head. But if you're a fairly good developer, this shouldn't be any surprise. I think Joomla's implementations are far beyond this. They're really doing an excellent job. I'm still using old kind of implementations here, and it seems to at this stage do the work, but I also anticipate that we will start implementing some of the better conventions as we continue. Well, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please, you're welcome to contact me either on GitHub or on the forum. I really would want to encourage other developers who understand this, what I've just explained, to actually help improve it. Because if you compile a component and you can see, okay, this area's code comes from here, and you know that this is not the best way of doing it, and that there are more Joomla convention, better Joomla convention to do this, I really want to hear from you. I really want to change it, either myself or you yourself doing a commit, pull request actually, and that's really how I see the way forward. I'm trying my very best to make this as appealing to the open source community, so that they would know that this is for real, and that they would actually, yes, make this their own. Thank you.